boys and girls. I'm Miss Lydia from the Boston Library. Thank you so much for joining me for story time this morning. Today we are going to talk about bees. So I wanted to read a little bit about bees from this book by Lynn Brunel. And our first chapter is called Be Smart. There's more to bees than buzzing, stinging, and making honey. That barely scratches the surface of how amazing these creatures are. Bees are insect superstars. They're built for survival, and their skills and talents help keep our lives sweet. What is a bee? Bees are pollinators. They fly from blossom to blossom in search of pollen and nectar. A flower's nectar is deep inside the flower. When bees land inside, they brush up against the parts of the flower that produce pollen. Pollen is sticky, and it covers and clings to the bee's body as the bee slurps the nectar up with its long tongue. When the bee lands on another flower, some of the pollen from the previous flower falls off, fertilizing the new flower. This process keeps plants reproducing. While bees have stingers, they don't use them for hunting because they don't eat meat. Most bees only sting as a last resort if they feel threatened. Some bees don't sting at all. Bees live on every continent except Antarctica and can be found in any environment that has flowers. There are more than 4,000 different kinds of bees in North America. So we're going to talk about just two main types of bees. So here are the common types of social bees. We all know about honeybees. Honeybees produce honey from the pollen and nectar of the plants they pollinate. In the wild, they often build their nests in trees or rock crevices, but they will occasionally make themselves at home in attics or chimneys. Their nests are made out of wax, formed into sheets of honeycomb. Depending on where they build, their nests can look either long and narrow, inside trees, or flat and wide in chimneys or attics. They store their honey in honeycombs to feed their young in colder months. Unlike bumblebees and solitary bees, honeybees can live for multiple years, so they need to prepare and store food to survive through the winter. Most of the honeybees in the United States live in hives created by beekeepers. Because their stingers are barbed and attached to their abdomens, they can only sting once. The stinger then rips away and leaves the bee to die. That's why they don't want to sting you. Bumblebees have extremely fuzzy, round bodies. They are wonderful pollinators and very helpful for the garden. Bumblebees often nest in the ground, but can be found above ground around patio areas or decks. They build their homes in shaded areas, under sheds, or even in clumps of grasses. Their nests can look like piles of leafy rubble. Each spring, a queen will start her own new colony. She will only live for a year. If threatened, bumblebees will buzz loudly and may even chase invaders for a considerable distance and deliver painful stings. Unlike honeybees, bumblebees can sting more than once. One more section from this book that I found interesting, and this is called No Bees, No Pizza. We know that bees help pollinate our favorite fruits and vegetables, but they also help things like alfalfa grass grow. And while you may not be a chief consumer of alfalfa grass, the dairy cows that produce the cheese that goes on your pizza sure are. No bees means no alfalfa, no cows, no cheese, no pizza. It's a domino effect. Not only will the cheese be affected, so will the tomatoes, green peppers, and the olive oil. When you think about it, losing bees means losing ice cream too. No bees, no grass, no cows, no cream. So save the bees and keep the fabulous food. And here's a list of a few things that we wouldn't have if the bees disappeared. It goes through alfalfa grass, almonds, apples, avocados, beans, blueberries, broccoli, carrots, cherries, cocoa, coconuts, coffee, cotton, cucumbers, eggplant, guava, kiwi, lemons, limes, mangoes, melons, peaches, plums, raspberries, roses, strawberries, tomatoes, and vanilla. And the list gets a lot longer than that. So we have to look out for our bees and make sure that they are healthy. The next book that we're going to read is called The Berenstain Bears Class Trip by Jan and Meg Berenstain. Brother Bear's class is going on a trip. The class is going to a honey farm. Mama and Papa Bear are teacher's helpers on the trip. Says Papa Bear, licking his lips. I hope they give out free samples. I'm sure they do, says Mama Bear. Sister Bear is going too. There's an extra seat on the bus next to Teacher Bob. Honey Bear will stay at home with Gramps and Gran. The bus is on its way. Let's all sing, says Cousin Fred. 99 jars of honey on the wall, sings the class. Papa Bear joins in. Are we almost there? Asks Sister. Almost, answers Papa. And they see a sign. Bear Country Honey Farm. Next exit. Hooray, yells the class. Brother Bear sniffs the air. Smell that, he says. Honey. They all take a deep breath. They sigh. I can almost taste that honey now, says Papa, licking his lips again. Look, we're here, says Sister. They all get off the bus. Teacher Bob leads the way. They see a huge field of beehives. The sound of buzzing bees fills the air. Over there is a clover field, says Teacher Bob. Thousands of bees gather nectar there. They bring it back to the hives and make it into honey. How do they do that? Asks Brother. Look, says Teacher Bob. He points to a hive. You can see for yourself. One of the hives has glass sides. The cubs can see the bees making honey. See that big bee, says Papa? That is the queen. Correct, says Teacher Bob. All of the others are her children. Wow, says Sister. She has more children than the old bear in the shoe. How do you get the honey out of the hive? Asks Brother. I'll show you, says Papa. He lifts the lid of the hive. No, no, says Teacher Bob. A huge cloud of bees flies out. Follow me, shouts Teacher Bob. All the bears run into the honey barn. Teacher Bob slams the door shut just in time. Now you will see the correct way to get the honey out, he says. The cubs look out the window. Beekeepers are gathering honey. They wear special suits and hats to keep from getting stung. First, the beekeepers blow smoke into the hives to make the bees sleepy. Then they lift out the honeycombs. They bring the honeycombs into the barn. They put them on a big wheel and they turn the crank. Golden honey pours into a big vat. Papa cannot wait to taste the honey. He leans over too far and gets honey all over himself. While Papa Bear is getting cleaned up, you may all have some honey samples, says Teacher Bob. Yay, cry the cubs. The class is back on the bus heading home. Mama Bear says, I saved a honey sample for you, Papa dear. No, thank you, says Papa. I've already had my sample. Our last book for today is called The Bee Tree by Patricia Polacco. I'm tired of reading, Grandpa, Mary Ellen sighed. I'd rather be outdoors running and playing. So, you don't feel like reading, eh? Feel like running, do you? Then I expect this is just the right time to find a bee tree, he said, taking down a jar and putting on his lucky hat. What's a bee tree, Grandpa? Mary Ellen asked. Well, it's where the bees make their home. It's where they keep the honey, the sweetest in the land, Grandpa chirped excitedly. But we already have honey, Grandpa, Mary Ellen said. Ah, but not honey like this, her grandpa answered with a wink. Mary Ellen and her grandpa put on their coats and went outdoors. They walked down past the hollyhocks to the garden and found bees gathering pollen from the flowers. Her grandpa carefully trapped some in a glass jar, making sure not to hurt them. When he was sure that he had enough, he smiled, leaned close to Mary Ellen. They'll take the pollen back to the hive to make it into honey. So we'll be right behind them. Then he slowly loosened the lid of the jar and let one single bee escape. It stayed on the mouth of the jar for a moment, flew straight up, and then buzzed towards the cornfield. "Quick now, run!" Grandpa called as he began to chase the bee. Just then, Mrs. Goldlock from down the creek way was walking baby Sylvester in his carriage. Mary Ellen and her grandpa ran by them. "We're off to find the bee tree today," Grandpa shouted. "I haven't done that since I was a girl," Mrs. Goldlock said excitedly. "May I come too?" Grandpa motioned her to follow, and the three of them were off, running. Baby Sylvester laughed out loud as his carriage bumped and bounced through the rows of corn. "Honk!" went the goose as it waddled after them. As they came from the cornfield and crossed Dietz Junction, Einar Tunvold came around the bend on his squeaky old bike. "Where are you all going in such a hurry?" he asked. "A bee tree," Mary Ellen puffed as the foursome scurried by. "Chasing a bee to its tree. This I would like to do also," he said as he stood up and pedaled faster. The wheels of his bike went tweedle, tweedle, squeak. Their boots slapped the ground, and the buggy pitched and swayed, and the goose honked as they ran after the bee. The bee swooped down, stopped, held in midair, and then circled past them and headed straight for St. Joe River. Olaf Lundhagen, while strolling on the nearby shore with the charming Herman sisters, Petra and Dorma, looked up and noticed the commotion coming towards them. "Where are you all going?" he called out. "To a bee tree we are going," Einar Tunvold puffed as he pedaled by. "Can we come too?" the two lovely ladies pleaded. "Fast! You'll have to run," Einar said. "We don't care, let's go!" the three shouted as they raced after him. Slap, bump, honk, tweedle, tweedle, squeak, thump, they went as they sped down the road after the bee. Klondike! Bertha Fitchworth, just back from an expedition in the Yukon, had car trouble next to the road. She looked up just in time to see everybody running by. "You say you're after a bee tree?" she shrieked. "Zounds, that won't be easy. But Eureka, what an adventure!" She sprinted along behind them. The bee dipped and soared as it made its way out of sight. But Grandpa carefully let out another, and the chase was on again. The noisy merry bunch galloped over Bird Talkfellow Ridge, only to run smack dab into fiduciary Long Drop's herd of goats. The goats bleated and bucked as the people clamored through them. "What ho!" Fiduciary called. "You're going to scare my goats." "A bee tree," a voice called back. With that, Fiduciary tooted his flute, and he and his flock joined the chase. "Bounding Billies, this will be great," he said on a dead run. Three traveling musicians looked up just in time to see a thundering stampede of goats, buggies, people, and bikes coming straight for them. "Why are they all running, Pa?" one of the boys asked his father. "We're after that bee," Grandpa said, pointing at the small dot in the sky. "It's leading us to a bee tree," Mary Ellen wailed as she streaked by them. "Come on along, Klondike," Berta chortled as she huffed past. Slap, bump, bleat, honk, tweedle, tweedle, squeak, thump, they went as they ran. Hoofs clattered, rows of corn were parted. Nothing really mattered but chasing that bee. They ran through Griner's Bluff and into Bishop's Meadow, around Dead Man's Tree, and then to Bird Talk Hollow. As they ran down the hollow, the bee took blinding speed and disappeared from their sight. They all stopped to catch their breath just in front of Dunk's wood. Grandpa handed the jar with the last bee to Mary Ellen, and she let it out. Sure enough, it flew straight and low right into Dunk's wood. "It's the bee tree," Grandpa whispered. "That's where the honey will be. But we'll need plenty of smoke." Everyone set about to build a smoke fire from twigs and damp leaves. When the smoke had quieted the bees, Grandpa balanced on Einar's bicycle and reached into the tree. As he pulled out small pieces of honeycomb, he dropped them into some of baby Sylvester's spare, clean diapers that Klondike Bertha was holding. Mary Ellen tied them into neat little bundles, and Mr. Lundhagen put them into the baby carriage. The musicians played merrily as the Herman sisters danced. Grandpa invited everyone back to the house for baking powder biscuits, fresh brewed tea, and of course, the honey. There was music, dancing, tall tales, and raucous laughter as they all buzzed about the sweet adventure of that day. Grandpa took Mary Ellen inside away from the crowd. "Now, child, I am going to show you what my father showed me, and his father before him," he said quietly. He spooned the honey onto the corner of one of her books. "Taste," he said, almost in a whisper. She savored the honey on her book. "There is such sweetness inside of that book, too," he said thoughtfully. "Such things, adventure, knowledge, and wisdom. But these things do not come easily. You have to pursue them. Just like we ran after the bees to find their tree, so you must also chase these things through the pages of a book." Then he smiled and hugged her. From that day on, Mary Ellen never again complained about her reading. She found it to be every bit as exciting as the wild chase through the Michigan countryside, and as sweet as the honey from the bee tree. And that's the end of that story. So I would tell you, please don't put any honey on your books, but there are sweet things to be found inside of your books if you read them. I wanted to take just a second to show you how to make a very easy little bee out of pipe cleaners. So I have a yellow pipe cleaner, a black pipe cleaner, and a white one. And what you're going to do is you're going to take both of your black and yellow pipe cleaner, about that length, and you're going to wrap them at the same time around your finger. Just like that. And then I'm going to slide it off. So I'm left with a little tube like that. And then what I'm going to do is bend the ends inside. So I'm going to take those ends, bend them in, and then do the same thing on the front. So that my bee ends up looking a little bit more like that. Then I'm going to make my antenna. So I take another short piece, I'm going to make it into a V, and then add little kinks into the end there. And I'm going to stick that in, right like that. And then for my wings, I'm going to make 2 loops. So I'm going to loop it around and twist it just a little bit in the center. Do the same thing on the other side and twist it just a little bit in the center. So that they end up looking like that. And then we do the same thing with those, stick them down inside, and there we have our bee. So if you wanted to, you can work to bend those ends in just a little bit more so that he has more of a head shape in the front. And you could also add googly eyes onto the front of it if you wanted to as well. I kind of like him this way, but some little tiny googly eyes on the front are a cute addition too. Here's a quick look at my beehive at the edge of our field. You can see, if you look really closely, you can see some bees buzzing around, flying in and out of the openings. I don't want to get much closer because I don't have a bee suit on hand, otherwise I'd show you a close look at it, but at least this gives you an idea of what a beehive looks like. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed our bee stories, and get outside and look for some bees in the flowers. There are lots of clover in bloom outside in the lawns right now, so you can definitely see some bees buzzing around. Remember, if you leave them alone, they won't come and sting you, so just give them a lot of space.